thank you guys so much for joining us today. We have three amazing panelists that are going to be able to share information on the legal law career fields. So thank you all panelists. I'll give you a minute here. In a minute, I'll have you guys introduce yourself. But kind of the format for the next 45 minutes is we'll give each of our panelists time to introduce themselves. And then we actually had a lot of questions submitted in advance. So what I'll do is I will run through their questions that they had just to make sure we can get those answered. And then we will also open that up. So Sarah Beaman is also with NICC. She's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, just make sure you put that in there, and then Sarah can interject those questions along the way as well. We will just let you guys know we do have a fire drill at 11 o'clock today. It's a statewide fire drill. So if we lose a few people, this will be recorded and we will be sharing that out as well. So Zach, since you joined us first here, I'm going to have you start. If you just want to share a little bit about yourself, your name, your position, where you work, and maybe how you got into the legal field here.
Sure. So my name is Zach Herman, and I am the Clayton County Attorney, which means I represent the county if the Clayton County were to get sued, or I give legal advice to the Board of Supervisors, the treasurer, the auditor, that sort of thing. What it does not mean is that I represent everyone in the county. At least once every couple of months, somebody comes in off the street with some sort of problem and they kind of demand that I represent them. And I say, well, no, I'm the county attorney. And they say, well, I live in the county. And I said, no, that's not what I do. And kind of what I spend most of my time doing then is prosecuting all the crimes that happen in Clayton County. So I represent the state of Iowa in prosecuting those crimes, and there's an assistant county attorney, and she handles a lot of that as well. My grandparents and parents are both from Clayton County, born and raised. I never lived here. I spent most of my life in North Carolina, and then my wife and I moved here in 2013 or 14 onto the family farm that's been in my family for 150 years, and now we're raising our daughter here and love it here and plan on being here for a long time.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that background, Zach.
Yep.
Jane, I'm going to have you go next, if you will.
Yeah, my name is Jane Hanson. I am an attorney in private practice in Manchester and Delaware County. I grew up in Delaware County and then left for about 14 years and then came back to practice in private practice. I work with my dad. I've been back in Manchester for the last 5.5 years. So unlike Zach, people can come here and ask me to represent them for their issues, and I don't prosecute people. I don't necessarily represent everyone that walks in the door because I do have different areas of practice that I work in and have more experience in. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jane. And then Megan, we'll have you round out if you want to just share a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. My name is Megan Beaman-Jacinto. Emphasis on the Beaman, as you may notice another person that looks a little bit like me here in the little boxes. I grew up in Earlham, Iowa, which is to the west of Des Moines, and I've been practicing my entire career in Southern California. And specifically in Coachella, California, which is not the home of the Coachella Music Fest, contrary to public perception. So the type of practice that I do is civil rights and workers' rights. I started my career in a nonprofit, which is like a charitable organization that represents and provides lawyers for low-income people that can't afford to pay lawyers. And then when it was time to expand the wings, I started my own practice doing very similar work, essentially representing workers against their employers who have violated their rights at work, either by discrimination or a wrongful termination, or even not paying them for the work they've done. And then we also often represent clients against governments that are discriminating, different agencies of government, including counties sometimes, that are discriminating against citizens or residents of that county. And then finally, I also practice immigration. So it's basically like anti-discrimination, workers' rights, and immigration that we practice, which are all very needed out here where I live.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Megan. So I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of jump right on into questions. And again, if any students have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. We know we have multiple students in one group. But I think panelists, we'll just go in that same order when I'm asking questions, if that's all right with you guys. So Zach, first things first, what interested you in this career? Was this the original career pathway you went on, or did you change things a couple times?
So this was certainly not a lifelong dream of mine. This was not what I wanted to be when I grew up. In 2007 or so, I was kind of in between jobs. And within a few days of each other, both my mom and my cousin said, "Have you thought about law school?" And so I kind of looked into it, and I looked at the Lsat, which is the test you take to get into law school. And it was my kind of test. Like I enjoyed practicing and getting ready for the Lsat. There's a reading comprehension part. There's a critical analysis part where you're kind of picking apart arguments. And there's a logic games part, which is kind of this complicated math word problem sort of thing. Like they were all like, that's my kind of thing. And so I took the Lsat. I did well on it. And then the next thing you knew, I'm sitting in law school. I mean, obviously I put a little more thought into it than that, but really, no, it was not a plan I ever had. I went through all of college not knowing what I was going to do exactly, and we can talk about that more later, educational path, but no, it was just kind of something I fell into, and I absolutely love it. I love everything about it. So no, it's not something that I certainly planned on or dreamed about for years.
Thanks for sharing, Zach. Jane, go ahead.
Wow, I probably started off after college in more of the route that Megan is currently in. After undergrad, I went into the Peace Corps. I lived in Peru for 2.5 years and worked with farmers, basically. And so when I moved back to the States after the Peace Corps, I lived in Chicago. I wanted to stay there. But then I worked in nonprofits, and then I found myself in a job where I didn't feel challenged. So when I was 28, I went to the local Barnes & Noble and picked up a book about the LSAT. I had grown up with a dad who was a lawyer in my small town, so I kind of knew a little bit about the pros and cons of that job. But I thought, well, I want to challenge myself. I want to continue learning and thinking critically about things. So I grabbed that LSAT book and I said, okay, if I get this score or better, I'll apply to law school. I got that score, I applied. And then even in law school, I didn't know I was going to move back to my hometown. That was never my plan when I graduated from West Delaware. I thought I wanted to get out. And then I found myself being pulled back into living in a rural community, which has its benefits and its challenges too. My second year in law school, I decided to talk to my dad and say, do you want me to work with you? Do you want to mentor me? And so that is how I found myself here. So yeah.
Thanks, Jane. And as the students are going to see, you guys have such different backgrounds and how you got to where you're at. So that is so important because not everyone takes the same path, and that's okay. So Megan, we'll have you share as well.
Yeah, that's funny because I was going to mention we have all three very different backgrounds, and I'll share mine in a second. But what we do have in common, apparently, is that none of the three of us had some master plan to become a lawyer. And we all, looks like we all arrived to that in our 20s, I guess, or 20s or 30s, right? So for me, since a young age, I've always been very interested in sort of standing up for the little guy. But growing up, I never knew any lawyers. I guess we did have one town lawyer. And in fact, I think Sarah was friends with his daughter or something, but I didn't understand what law practice was. And I sort of equated it to being a banker or having something to do with money. So it wasn't something that it was even in my vision growing up. But I did have this interest in sort of like helping out people that need help getting through systems or dealing with unfair things. And it was in college when I met a professor who was a former civil rights activist and very important to me in terms of teaching me a lot about the world and different opportunities. And I remember still to this day, one day in class in college, that he mentioned that there are these lawyers called constitutional lawyers that help people fight against discrimination. And literally up to that point, I didn't understand that that existed. So just for the students to understand, you know, there are a lot of doors out there for you that may not have even opened yet, or that you don't know are there. And from there, I sort of started building toward working as a lawyer in some kind of like social justice type approach. And I've had to kind of create my own path as I go. And I ended up in private practice, but still able to do the type of work that the community organizations are doing, and right there next to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. So that is going to be the perfect tie-in, because you guys all had a little bit of different paths. Where did your educational path take you? So if you want to just take us on that journey, and you know, maybe share exactly where you went to school too, if some of those students are looking at maybe researching some law schools.
So like I said, I spent most of my life in North Carolina. I went to undergraduate college at the University of North Carolina at Asheville, which was a smaller state school in the mountains. It was awesome. My dad was a chiropractor. And so I first went to college thinking, yeah, I'll do that. You know, took biology sorts of courses and chemistry, and just wasn't doing it for me. And so I ended up majoring in multimedia arts and sciences, which is kind of the video, graphic, animation side of computers. But this was the late 1990s. And so computers were rapidly changing. And by the time I graduated in 2001, I honestly felt that that degree was useless, because everything I had learned a year or two prior seemed obsolete already. And so I just kind of had jobs after college, you know, nothing specialized, nothing using that degree. And then that kind of led me to law school, like I said earlier. And so I went to law school at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, UNC. You know, I was born in Iowa, so I was always a Hawkeye fan. I always hated North Carolina while I lived there. I hated Carolina blue, but there I was, and I learned to love it. I was still happy when Iowa beat UNC earlier this year in basketball, but a little torn. So again, like before, you know, it was nothing I went to undergrad school for. It was nothing I specialized in undergrad to lead me to law school. Once you get to law school, kind of all bets are off. You know, it doesn't matter where you came from, what you majored in earlier. You're just there to learn the law, and you get to take kind of whatever classes you want to shoot towards. You know, there's no specialized law degree. Everyone gets the same law degree. You're just a lawyer, and you can kind of choose to do with that what you want. So that's how I got there. Again, like before, nothing specialized, just there I was.
Thank you, Zach.
I would echo what Zach says. I mean, all bets are off when you get to law school. It doesn't matter what your undergraduate, you have to have an undergraduate degree, but it didn't matter what it was in. Like I said, when I graduated from high school here, I was 17. I wanted to go as far away as possible. And I still landed in the Midwest for college, but I did move to Cincinnati, and I got my undergraduate degree in business administration. I selected my major because my mom was like, well, you don't know what you want to do, so having a business degree is versatile. So maybe I was a little driftless in undergrad, I guess you could say. So I didn't really have any designs on being a lawyer at that point in time, but I did get a business degree. And then, like I mentioned before, I moved out of the country for a couple of years. And then when I got back, I decided I wanted to move to Chicago, but I moved to Chicago at the literal worst time ever to try to get a job. I moved to Chicago in the middle of that financial crisis in 2008. So I worked quite a bit of temp work before finding a job at a nonprofit. I worked in temp work for a long time. Like I said, I worked in a nonprofit that I didn't find overly fulfilling. I wanted to find more challenge. I wanted to have more impact on people's lives. And I do think that lawyers can do that. When I chose where to go to law school, I will say that was definitely more of a financial decision rather than trying to go to or even apply to a law school that had like prestige, like one of the, like, you know, I didn't apply to like any Ivy Leagues or anything. I just wanted to get a law degree as financially or as inexpensively as possible. So I went to a state school. For me, I went to Northern Illinois. I had been an Illinois resident for 5 years at that point. Illinois law schools, they At that time, they only charge in-state residents half tuition. And then they had a great program at Northern Illinois for graduate assistantships. That's what I did. The last 2 years of law school, I didn't pay tuition. I had a stipend, and it was just what is the most economical for me. And I think that that's really what people are looking for at this point in time, whether it be community college, undergraduate work, or grad work, is how can I get the degree that I want and get into the field that I want to get in without tons of student loan debt. And that was kind of my focus at that point in time. I will also say that when I was applying to law school, I had already been on my own and, learned those adult life lessons of what do I have to make to pay my bills? So I knew that carrying a lot of student loan debt would probably not be great for me in the long run. So that's kind of how I went about choosing my educational pathway.
Thank you, Jane. Megan, you're up. Round us off, please.
Thank you. So I went to college at Grinnell College in central Iowa, and having, what I already explained to be my interest in sort of working for justice, but not understanding that was the law back then. I studied, and it's a liberal arts college, so we study all kinds of things in those type of colleges, really broad spectrum of subjects, but my main focus or my major was sociology, and they called it Africana Studies. Other schools call it African American Studies. And I chose those two fields in particular as focus, as my way of sort of learning more about race and racism and how that impacts everyone's lives, and how I could have a part in trying to help fix it or remove it. So after college, I did have the idea that I perhaps wanted to be a lawyer, but actually didn't have like the mentorship or guidance to understand even, what steps to take to go to law school. And I think that also caused me to procrastinate a little bit, to be honest, just the intimidation of it. And I took a couple of years after law school, just doing my thing, maybe a little bit similar to Jane. So I was living in San Francisco and working as a waitress, and volunteering in some organizations while I was out there, but more or less, just kind of having fun, so to speak, even though I was finding my work to be very unfulfilling as well. And after those 2 years, I guess in the middle of them, started applying to law schools around the country. And I visited law schools in all parts of the country, actually. And then I decided to come back to the Midwest for law school. And I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I chose that school because it had a pretty strong focus on what's called public interest law. So that's just a really broad term for all kinds of lawyer work that serves the community or serves the public. And it also had these clinics. It had many clinics, probably the most or one of the most in the country, which clinics are like little mini law firms within the law school that are supervised by lawyer professors, and then where the students are able to perform lawyer-like work as they're learning. So that was very important and interesting to me, and that's why I chose that school.
Awesome. You guys all have such unique and different backgrounds, and I hope the students are noting that. My gosh, you guys are all over the country for where you guys all chose to go to school. So I think that's really important to note that too, because you don't have to have that narrow focus. You can look outside the state as well. You can start locally. Or not, but look at that, you guys are all, or Megan, you were near the area, went to Grinnell. Zach and Jane, you're back in the area, so I think that's great to note that. You guys all practice different types of law. So I'm going to jump into some student questions. So this was one of their questions is, can you take us through what a day in your life is like, and then kind of add that, do you have a work-life balance, and how does that blend with your chosen career?
It's in my job, it seems like every day, I come to work and I have some things I want to get done. And then the first 4 hours of my day is just emails and phone calls that I was not expecting that then I have to take care of. I'll get an email from the treasurer who needs me to look at a contract she's signing for something, and okay, I'll do that. It's just constant kind of stuff coming at you. And for me, I'm not the best organizer, and so I'm just kind of mentally having to constantly keep straight, what do I still have to do today? I keep index cards everywhere that are just like lists of things to do, and I just, will jot them on there so I have it in front of me. Like, this is what I want to get accomplished today. I've got to get something filed in this case. I want to send the defense attorney an email on this. And as long as I get those things done, those other things that come in, that's fine. I'll take care of those. So that's kind of what my day is mostly sat here in front of this computer, answering the phone, sending emails, getting things done. COVID has really kind of changed our court schedule. Tuesday mornings are our kind of court days that, we have criminal stuff. And now I pretty much just call in on a Tuesday morning. I mean, I've been to the courthouse probably 3 times in the last 6 months. We're getting things done by phone, by video, by paper. So I don't spend a lot of time in court. As far as a home life balance, the nice thing about being the county attorney and prosecuting crimes is I'm not so much responsible for people. Like I'm not representing, a mom in a divorce who's trying to get custody of her kids. I don't have the weight of that taking home with me. Like I don't really take my work home. At 5 o'clock when I leave here, it stays here until the next morning. And it's not terribly stressful. It's not, there are, some cases are bigger than others that I might think about a little bit while I'm at home. And, there might be a couple of days where I'm a little stressed out, but for the most part, no, this job stays here. I have a normal kind of, 8:30 to 5 job. When I get home, I am home with my family. I will occasionally get a call on my cell phone from a police officer who has a pressing question, but that's few and far between. So no, this job right now is just absolutely perfect for a work-life balance. I think you can put however much time you want to into being a lawyer, right? I mean, you always have the discretion to take a case or not, and you never know which ones are really going to end up being the most of your time. But that's kind of the nice thing about being a lawyer is you don't have to do everything. You can say no, and if something's going to really, really take away from your home life, you have the discretion to say, you know what, this may be better left for somebody else.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you for emphasizing that boundaries, right? This career, you might have to have good boundaries. Jean, we'll have you answer that same.
Okay, I never have a typical day. This morning, I had to be up. I'm on the board of trustees at our local hospital. I had to be there at a meeting at 7:30. I was there for an hour and a half. I thought it was going to be half an hour. And then I get here, I got to return. I'm like Zach, I have to return calls. I have to return emails. The volume of calls or emails just kind of depends on what's going on. Unlike someone in Zach's position, and Megan, I don't know exactly how you get paid, but I have to generate my own income. Okay, so if I'm not at work and I'm not working, I'm not making money. So I have to always be, quote unquote, hustling or whatever to get work done, work out the door, bills out the door. But like Zach, I can also choose kind of how busy I want to be. So I don't have to take every person that walks in the door. So I get to choose my work-life balance. But as someone who's self-employed, that line gets blurred a little bit. I'm in my office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I'm thinking about work all the time. I bet all of us are. I bet Holly, you are thinking about work all the time. But you do have to create your own work-life balance. Types of or areas of law that I work in, I don't think I've really touched on that too much, is I do a lot of estate planning for people. I do a lot of real estate transactions. I do, what else? Oh, I help people form businesses. I do after death work, which is like probate work. And then I had been taking on court appointments to represent people in juvenile court matters, and then substance abuse and mental health commitments. But what I really do is I really work with people, work with families, and try to help people achieve their ultimate goals. I do a lot of succession planning for farm families. I live in a farming community, so I work with a lot of farmers, do a lot of that. I have the ability in my job to develop long-standing relationships with people. So a lot of my day is working with people, developing those relationships, developing that trust, and then getting work out the door, billing people, and bringing money in, because ultimately that's what I'm here for. I need to pay my bills, like all of us.
Thank you for
So-
that, Jane, too, and differentiating too with a private practice. That's important to point out. Megan, we'll have you answer that same question.
Okay, so my answer might be sort of a mix of those two, because one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that I'm also an elected official on the my city's city council, and we're a city of about 50,000. So that's a lot of responsibility on top of my law work. And my days are very different, just like the two of you, in terms of having to have somewhat of a plan, but also some flexibility to respond to the things that come up, or the communications that we receive from others. And then layering on top of that, I also have multiple public committee type meetings and council meetings throughout a given month as well. And so I have to make sure that I'm available for those, and that everything else is scheduled in the gaps. You know, there's a perception, and maybe some of the students watching might believe that lawyers spend all of our time in court or doing things that you might see on like court TV type shows. And as Zach said, you know, for most lawyers, that's a small part of our schedule, or our week, or our month. And leaving aside the fact that we're doing it all by phone during the pandemic, I am in court more than a lot of my colleagues out here. So I litigate, which means that I fight cases in court, basically in front of a judge or a jury. But even that is only, you know, a small percentage of my time. And so most of the time, sadly, is spent, I don't know, sadly or for good or for bad, is spent sitting at a desk in front of a computer typing things. So that's a lot of jobs, right? But essentially we're typing letters, or maybe we're preparing lawsuits, or we're researching issues in our cases where we're going to need to help our clients by proving something, or by finding documents to prove the truth, right? Things like that. So it's varied. I agree with Zach and Jane that to some extent, we can set our own boundaries and control our work-life balance. And I also agree with Jane that as a person that has to generate actually not only my own income, but also the income of my 6 employees, there is a lot of pressure and stress in terms of working as much as possible to make sure, and looking into the future as far as what income is coming in. Our income in our office comes basically from the employers or the governments that lose the lawsuits that we brought against them. So that's good, because I'm not charging people, and I enjoy that. But it also is very unpredictable and sort of comes in waves. So that can add a layer of this like business type management responsibility that I did never imagine for myself either. So, and I don't work weekends. That's where I draw the line. So there's my not typical, but best description of what my days look like.
Thank you guys for sharing that. And I'm emphasizing that again, boundaries, you know, that's going to be one of the key things, students, make sure you're writing that down. Now, you guys are all in different areas of law. What are the biggest challenges you faced within those areas? Or if there's a unique case that you were a part of that you'd want to just kind of share how that was. And Zach, I'll have you start.
You know, I looked at this question. I don't really have an answer for a big challenge. I mean, I think my job just doesn't quite have big challenges. I mean, there's cases that you like more than others, but I would say one of my biggest frustrations with just being a lawyer in general is how slow the legal process moves in a way that you can't really speed up if you wanted to. I'm a part-time county attorney. About 1/3 of the Iowa county attorneys are part-time, which means that I can do private practice if I want to. And so I just do just a little bit, you know, if wills, some divorces, if they're pretty, not a whole lot of fighting in them. And I'm representing the woman in a divorce that was filed late 2018. In the criminal realm, and so things just keep dragging on. And so especially when there's people involved, it's hard for them. It's easy for me to say, well, it just got pushed to a couple months from now, but that's very frustrating for other people, and it's just such a slow process. I would just kind of maybe say another challenge, and again, maybe not lawyer specific, but just in general, is when you're dealing with an attorney on the other side who really is your opponent, more or less, in this, in a case. You may be friends with them outside of that, but maintaining civility in emails, maybe taking the extra minute to reread what you've written before you send it, to be like, is this, because I especially can be pretty snarky or sarcastic in my emails. And so I do really kind of have to pull that back and be like, this is not the way to do it. If a judge saw this, would he think that was maybe a good email to send, or would he maybe think, yeah, maybe you should have toned it back a little? So I think that's a constant challenge, is to, maintain your integrity and respect for the other side.
Thank you, Zach.
My biggest challenge is balancing demands of my clients and managing expectations. I will get a phone call from someone. Well, I'll get more than one phone call, but I'll get phone calls from people, and they'll say, well, here's what I need you to do. When can you get this done? And so I, like Zach, have my list of stuff that I'm always working on, and it is constantly growing. And it's like, okay, well, I have to get these 5 things done before I can start working on your stuff. And when can I get these 5 things done, even though I know I'm going to get interrupted by emails and phone calls and things are going to come up. And then it's also balancing demands of clients that I do have longer relationships with. Maybe I would bump them to the top of my list because I've done so much work for them. And people pay attorneys good money to get things done, and they want them done quickly. So it is balancing demands and managing expectations. And then also other challenges is it saying no to people? I bill typically at an hourly rate. So I know that if I turn down work, I'm turning down money, but I also turn down work because if I can't get things done in a timely manner for people, that doesn't look good for me, and it's not good for the client. So I do think it is challenging to turn things down that you may want to work on and you could do good work on, but just knowing that you can't meet expectations. So I would find that challenging.
Thank you, Jane. Megan, you are next.
Sure. So a few things come to mind. Thank you, Zach, for raising the issue of scaling back emails, because I certainly deal with that on a daily basis as well. But the bigger issues that I had in mind, for me, that I'm really community oriented, and sort of, even though I'm representing clients, it's usually part of a bigger issue or a bigger movement that we're one of the biggest challenges there is that sometimes things are unfair to people, but not necessarily illegal. And so it's hard to explain to clients sometimes, and it's hard for me to have to explain that, or to have to recognize the limits of the law, to explain to clients, like, that is completely unfair, but unfortunately the law doesn't make it illegal. And so there's no way for you to take legal action about it. Luckily, with my other hat, I could then, work with clients and community members to say what other types of solutions exist for unfair things. And sometimes that even involves working with state representatives or federal representatives to improve the law. And that's one thing that, lawyers can get involved in doing on different levels as well. I also have, for a similar reason, I have a hard time saying no to clients. It does have something to do with the income aspect of it, as Jane was mentioning, but also because I really am focused on this community improvement aspect of things. So when I see unfair things that maybe violated the law, but it's a tough case or it's going to be hard to prove, there are a lot of times I should say no. for my work-life balance or for the potential impact on our office resources or our income. And sometimes I say yes, because it's an issue that's important to me. And these cases that we work on take several years, sometimes 5 years to get to trial. And then sometimes if there are appeals, it could be a 10-year long case. And if it ends up being a case that's, tough to win, which a lot of our cases are, but I mean, super tough to win, I'm looking at potentially spending, 2, 3, 5, or 10 years working on something and then never being paid for it. And also having the client never really win or get it in a good outcome. So I have to be really careful with exercising that boundary for everyone's sake. And the last thing I wanted to mention as a challenge is being a woman in the field. And that might vary from place to place, but when I'm in court, usually one of 2 or 3 women in the courtroom, and there could be like 10 or 20 or 30 men. So even though we're equally qualified, of course, and we're equally able to do the work, it can feel very isolating sometimes. And also there is still, at this day and age, there are ways in which judges and other attorneys treat women differently sometimes, that sort of assume like we don't know what we're doing, or we're less powerful or less educated than our male counterparts. So that is a challenge, and I like to be transparent and upfront about that too.
Thank you for sharing that, Megan, too. And all panelists, I mean, what great information. I'm hearing soft skills, boundaries. Thank you for sharing those personal, Megan, that's a very personal thing to overcome, especially for the ladies that are listening, just make sure if this is what you want to go into, that you're keeping that in mind as well. So that kind of actually ties into, I know we have a little bit of limited time left, so I'm kind of picking what questions we're going to answer next, but I think what we could tie into is, I think we'll end with what you're all in different areas of law, and you all got to this place at very different ways, right? But how did you ultimately choose the branch of law that you went into?
Well, I'll just kind of keep with my theme here, which is just, I've kind of just fallen into this with no plan. When I went into law school, again, I had this multimedia computery kind of background. So I was drawn to intellectual property kind of things, particularly trademark. I really enjoyed trademark and that class in law school. And then when I graduated, I again ended up here in this small town. I kind of moved into an office with an older attorney, and she was kind of in the process of winding down, and she did kind of big civil cases. And I was not there too long before I realized, boy, I don't really think this is what I want to do. Those cases Megan's talking about that last 5 years, not my thing. And at that time, the county attorney at that time, Al Heavens, offered me a job as special prosecutor, which was just prosecuting the simple misdemeanors in magistrate court. I didn't pay very much, but it was a very little steady paycheck, and I said sure. And so I was doing that, and I enjoyed that. And then the assistant county attorney in 2016 left to go to Dubuque, and so I stepped into that role. And then in 2019, the beginning of the year, the county attorney, Al Heavens, who had been a county attorney for 10 years, was appointed to be a judge. And here I am. I'm the county attorney, and now it's an elected position. I ran unopposed in this last election, but from here on out, I'll be on the ballot every 4 years. And again, I absolutely love it. I wish I had focused on criminal law from the very beginning, that sort of thing. Again, no plan. Here I am. You just kind of find what you like, and you start gravitating towards it and getting better at it. And pretty soon you're in something that you love. And that's how I got here.
And Zach, that's a great thing to point out, that you're an elected official too. Yeah. So students, just keep that in mind as well if you're going to be working in that county, in a county legal aspect. Jane, you're up next.
We are all elected officials, people. I get elected to the board of trustees for the hospital every 4 years. So I guess maybe that's a commonality we all have. When I knew that there were a couple areas of law that I didn't want to get into, no offense, Zach, I did not want to get into criminal law. I love true crime like every other person on this planet, but I had no desire to get into criminal law. And I do not want to be involved in divorces either. Because in my opinion, and that's my opinion, and you can take it or leave it, no one walks away happy. And I wanted to develop, one of my things that I wanted to do was develop relationships with people. And while I can't make everybody happy all the time, I do want people to ultimately be happy. And I think that that's kind of pushed me into the area of law that I work in, because I do think I work in happy law. People are generally happy to buy and sell real estate. They're generally relieved to get their estate planning done. So they're excited to start businesses or talk about operating them. And then people are never happy when someone passes away. But being able to help them resolve, get to that resolution with, mom's estate or dad's estate. I really get to develop relationships with those clients because we are meeting for, that's something I work on. It's a court case, and I work on it for like a year or 2 years, and I work with those same people for that amount of time. So I think that that's maybe what pushed me into the areas of law that I was in. And then the ultimate push was I have this mentor that has to love me and has to put up with me. I work with my dad. So that was kind of a good way to get into where I'm at. And my dad is older, and I knew he was going to be transitioning out. So I knew that he had the years left to mentor me and then ultimately transition out. So that's where I am, how I got where I am.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay, so I, similar to what Zach was saying earlier, in law school, everyone gets the same law degree. You don't pick a major, or you don't have to focus on a certain area of law in law school. And so that's the same thing I did, just like everyone else. Still having in mind that I wanted to do something that would be good for communities, right, that need better access to the legal system and so forth. So when I was graduating from law school, I applied to jobs all around the country that I thought would be meaningful work. And I ended up with 3 offers. One was in Savannah, Georgia, one was in Mexico, and the other one was in Coachella, California, which is where I am now. So I actually took the one in Mexico, but they had relied on grant funding for that position, and they lost the grant funding. And luckily the Coachella position was still open. That's how I ended up out here. And the work that I started doing there was for a nonprofit that serves rural low-income Californians in providing free legal representation, or free lawyers for issues that they're facing. And the way that I came about my area of law, answering the question, is when I arrived there, even the directing lawyers there asked me, what would you like to practice? And I said, I would like to do whatever people need the most. And so what was needed the most in that office, which in particular focused on representing farm employees, farm workers, was employment law and housing habitability law, and a bit of immigration. And so that's how I started developing my skills in those areas. And employment law often has to do with anti-discrimination. And I was able to continue practicing essentially in those areas, which are what the community here needs most, as I moved into the private practice model. So mine was sort of adapting to what was needed.
Well, I think this information is great. So thank you, Zach, Jane, and Megan, because each of the areas that you practice are so unique and different. So I think it's going to give our students a great opportunity to explore these a little bit more. But I am going to turn this over to Sarah, because we do have an activity that she's going to be sharing.
All right, thank you so much. Just to reiterate what Holly said, you guys have so many different perspectives and have helped our students, and the recording will help our future students as well. So in your information about this event, you were promised a take-home activity. So this will be emailed out to the students who have registered. So we're just going to kind of preview it and let you know what to expect. So you'll be sent out this form, So it says, please submit your response to the scenarios. And Megan, I might have you give an example of an answer. I think it's called issue spotting. It is actually done in law school. So I see the other lawyers also smiling. So obviously it's common for them. So you're going to describe what areas you believe that a law or laws were broken and would have grounds for legal action. So you'll receive the correct answers next Wednesday, and the winner will receive an NICC surprise swag bag. So just miscellaneous swag. So name, email, school. And this first one, I'll just read out loud, and then if Megan, if you want to jump in with an example or something, that would be great. Then we'll email it out after. So Carmen works as in an office as an administrative assistant. She really wanted to impress her boss with all the work she could do, so she skipped lunch to try to get everything done. Later that day, she fainted from not eating and hit the back of her head on a desk, requiring hospitalization. The doctor ordered her out of work for 7 days, and then she could go back to work afterwards as long as she would only work sitting and could take a break every 2 hours. Her employer thought that arrangement would be a major burden for the office. So when she came back after 7 days, he let her know her position was being dissolved. So Megan, do you want to jump in maybe with one example of where an issue would be, and then they can submit the rest of them?
Sure. So in this one, the main issues that you can see are the injury and the need for medical care and some help at work, right? So it's thinking about what did the employer have to do, or what might have that employer needed to do after the person was injured and then needed some support at work. So I'll just leave it there and let students think about, without knowing the law, of course, what you think might apply there.
And if you go above and beyond and do some research, then, that just improves your chance of being the winner. And then there's another scenario here that we'll let the students read through. And all of our registrants will also get a copy of the recording after this is done as well.
So we want to thank our panelists again for your guys' time. Thank you for the students for attending as well. Just echoing again, the recording will go out, and we will share that on different NICC examples, like our Facebook page. So we have a Manchester Center Facebook page. So this recording will be shared on there as well. And as Sarah mentioned, we'll be using this for future recruitment. So this will kind of used if we have a student that's interested in law. This might be their first step, is to listen to you guys and make sure that that's really what they're thinking before we set up that job shadow experience. So thank you very much. We appreciate all your feedback. And Sarah, Stephanie, and I will hang out if there's any additional questions, but otherwise we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yep. And again, I will be sending out an email probably within about 2 hours with the link for that, the activity and the link to the Zoom link. It takes me a few minutes to get that uploaded. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't know